the NFL just screwed the Denver Broncos as a game between Denver and Indianapolis, which was knotted up for the entire contest, ends in ridiculous and heartbreaking fashion for the Denver Broncos. In my entire life, being an NFL fan, being a Broncos fan, and following this team, I have never seen anything like this, and I'm truly appalled at how that game just ended. We're going to break it all down. We're going to talk everything Broncos week 2 right here today on Broncos Digest, not just the heartbreaking end to this game, but everything else leading up to that, where the Broncos thrived, where they struggled, and how this game shaped up to be the first loss of the season for the Denver Broncos. Before we dive into everything surrounding the game, we are going to touch on what I think is one of the most appalling things that I've seen in the NFL for a very long time. So just to go through the last few minutes of this game, Will Lutz gets set up for a 40-something yard field goal, 100% in his range, and the first field goal for him of the day. And of course, he doinks it off the upright, and it's no good to keep the Colts within a score to win the game. So Indy gets the ball. They storm down the field, try to get into field goal range, and of course, the Denver defense comes in, makes a great stop, and sets up a young Spencer Schrader for a 60-yard career-long field goal. Very unlikely that a young guy with not a lot of experience is going to be able to hit a field goal like this. And of course, exactly what I thought was going to happen. I was not even surprised. He puts it so far to the right of the upright, not even close. Denver should get the win. So much excitement for the Broncos. They're 2-0, and then this happens.
It's against Denver. It is against Denver.
Personal foul, leverage, defense number 96.
That's a 15-yard penalty. That's a huge, oh my goodness. That is a huge penalty.
First down.
Well, it's right in the middle here. You see the leverage jumping over the top. That's where the penalty was called, and that's not a little penalty. That's 15-yard penalty. Now it is a 45-yard field goal. It's against Denver. It is against Denver.
Personal foul, leverage.
That is the most bizarre penalty that I have ever seen in my entire life watching the NFL and watching the Broncos. Leveraging? Has anyone even heard of that? I've literally never seen this get called in my entire life. And if you go back and you watch that highlight, what they're calling is one of the linemen for the Denver Broncos is allegedly putting his hands on one of the linemen for the Colts and using him to push himself up and leverage him to a higher point to try to block the field goal. But if you look at the way that his body's moving, this is just how I'm perceiving it. If anyone thinks that I'm incorrect here, or if anyone saw it differently, I am very open to hear any sort of argument or any sort of juxtaposition to what I saw. But the way that I saw it, his hands touched the Colts lineman, and then he stepped back and just jumped off his own 2 feet. He didn't use any force. He didn't put any friction down onto the lineman for the Colts to get up. I couldn't believe that it was called. I was sitting in front of the TV celebrating a Broncos win. And the next thing you know, Spencer Schrader is moved up 15 yards and he's set up for a gimme 45-yard field goal with 0 time left on the clock. And that was how the Denver Broncos were handed their first loss of the season. Ridiculous officiating in this game. This is like the most frustrating moment of the season for me last year. Let me preface, this wasn't an officiating issue. This was just horrible luck. But the most frustrating moment for me as a Denver Broncos fan last year was when we should have won the game against the Kansas City Chiefs. We had a in-range gimme field goal, and then it was, of course, blocked in just a ridiculously frustrating play. This is the most frustrated I've been since that moment, and I'm probably twice as frustrated because that is just ridiculous. Just a very tough call and a very tough break for the Denver Broncos. Could not believe that call, but I will say we are going to break down everything surrounding this game, both offensively and defensively. And there were a lot of aspects to the way that the Denver Broncos played that wasn't very strong, and it ended up putting them in that position. If you're hoping for a win off of a missed game-winning field goal, you've essentially already put yourself in a place where you didn't play the best game on either side of the ball, and you're just hoping that that field goal doesn't go through the uprights, which that happened initially for the Broncos, but then a ridiculous call by the refs that I 100% do not agree with ended up bailing out the Colts. But that's not what we're going to talk about anymore. Now we're going to dive into everything around the Denver Broncos and how they performed against Indianapolis today. On the contrary to last week against the Tennessee Titans, Bo Nix figured it out, and he came out and played a much better game today. He looked very good offensively in the pocket, all of the throwing that he did, and he was even able to get the legs going a little bit and rush as well. But looking at Bo Nix and his stats today as quarterback, 22 for 30, 206 passing yards, averaged 7 yards per throw, 3 passing touchdowns to 3 different receivers, which we'll get into that and the depth around our offense in a little bit, and only 1 tough interception, which was then backed up by the Denver defense. Denver rushing today, J.K. Dobbins had a very successful game as the RB1. Our running back room continues to have a lot of positive around it, and it looks like it's going to continue to develop throughout the season. Dobbins had 14 carries for 76 yards. His longest was for 23, averaged 5.4 yards per carry, and he had a rushing touchdown as well. Very good stuff from J.K. Dobbins. And like I said, Bo Nix as well. Carried the ball himself 3 times, total of 20 yards, averaged about 7 yards per rush when he elected to take it himself. That's good stuff from Bo Nix as well. The only thing that we didn't really see that we saw last week was a little bit more of a rotation between the 2 running backs, J.K. Dobbins and Troy Franklin. A lot more coming from, not Troy Franklin, RJ Harvery. Sorry about that. Read the name wrong. Between J.K. Dobbins and RJ Harvery. But essentially, they elected to just kind of stick with that RB1 J.K. Dobbins, and it did decent. The rushing was a key part of this game today. J.K. Dobbins looked really good. He was really explosive, and he's able to break through a lot of power and a lot of tackles from the Indianapolis line. And then just looking and thinking about how Bo Nix was essentially the strongest part of this game came from Bo Nix was because of the Denver receiving. You look at all of the yards that all these guys had today. Troy Franklin, 8 receptions for 90 yards, 1 touchdown. Marvin Mims, 24 yards and 2 receptions. He had a touchdown as well. And then Adam Trotman, the tight end, he had a touchdown late in the game too. Reception depth really came out, and it really showed that our offense is able to put up strong scoring numbers. Every point that we scored today came from our offense and our receiving, and Bo Nix being able to produce offensively. The only field goal attempt that we had did not make it through the upright, which we'll dive into that and how it essentially costed us the game in just a little bit here. But comparing to last week against Tennessee, the Broncos offense worked out a lot of kinks, and they fixed a lot of aspects of their game that allowed them to have a much more offensively productive game. Now, obviously, in the end, when it mattered the most, they got shut out on 3rd down multiple times and weren't able to get any offensive production going at the end of the game. But still, looking bigger picture and looking long-term, Bo Nix and his receiving core and the running back core for the Denver Broncos, a lot of improvement in what they were able to do today playing against the Colts. And you look at a guy like Troy Franklin, just so much offensive production. He really stepped up and he really contributed to the overall fact that Denver has receiving depth and that they don't need to rely on that wide receiver 1, Courtland Sutton. He had a quiet day. And Bo Nix really showed that he's able to lean on some of these other receivers and some of these other guys throughout the game and show that scoring is very possible on all facets of our offense. The biggest struggle, in my opinion, today, which a lot of people may not agree with this because the defense did have a solid game in certain aspects. They had, I think, 3 or 4 red zone stops for the Broncos against the Colts when the Colts were pushing within 20 yards to score a touchdown. The defense came up very clutch and didn't allow essentially 3 to 4 touchdowns when it ended up just being a field goal for Spencer Schrader. Schrader did go 5 for 5 with field goals today, so he had a strong day and helped put a lot of points up on the board for Indianapolis. But outside of the red zone stops and that efficient aspect of defense, what the Broncos defense allowed Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis offense to do today is not very strong, in my opinion. Daniel Jones today, 23 for 34, 316 passing yards. That is absurd, in my opinion, from the Denver defense. Averaged about 10 yards per throw, had a passing touchdown. And then if you look at the rushing, Jonathan Taylor, the RB1, 165 rushing yards. So if you look at those two stats, 316 and 165 yards for passing and rushing respectively, we allowed over 500 offensive yards under Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts. That is not strong defense, in my opinion. And if you look back to the rankings that came out after week 1, where the Broncos defense and the Broncos secondary was ranked first amongst the entire NFL as far as defense goes, we come into this game and we essentially switched up what happened last week. The offense carried this game because the defense wasn't able to produce a lot of stops and keep the Colts out of field goal range. But luckily, every time the offense had the ball, Bo Nix was able to produce really high caliber offense and score a lot for the Denver Broncos. So just kind of rough defensively as far as what the Broncos were able to do as far as stopping the Colts went today. And then here is another just absolute dagger for what happened in this game and essentially why we lost this game. We kind of broke this down a little bit at the start of the video, but diving a little bit deeper now, with under 3 minutes to go, leading by 2, Will Lutz comes in for about 40-yard field goal, which is well within his range. And we've seen him be very successful as a field goal kicker over the last few years for the Denver Broncos. Hasn't had to kick a single field goal yet today, but he is 4 for 4 on extra points as the Broncos have 4 touchdowns as it stands at this moment. This is a very important field goal because it takes the winning field goal out of the picture for the Colts, who then would have to go down the field and score a touchdown against the Denver defense to win the game. But of course, Will Lutz, well within range at about 40 yards, kicks it right to the right upright. It doinks off the side, and we miss the field goal, put the Colts almost at midfield, and give them an opportunity to storm down and kick a game-winning field goal. Just really tough stuff from Will Lutz and just kind of what he was able to do and what he was trying to do as far as that goes, and as far as what they were preaching for, just trying to get the win against Indy today. And then like you look at a guy like Spencer Schrader too. He was 5 for 5 today. And then after he misses that 60-yard field goal bomb, he gets bailed out. And that ridiculous call, like I said, in my opinion, that ridiculous call gives the Colts the win. So, very unfortunate. And I think the Broncos should have won that game, in my opinion. But at the same time, as ridiculous as that call was, and as unfortunate as it was, at the end of the day, the Broncos got themselves to that point in which the Colts even had a chance in the first place at a game-winning field goal because of over 500 offensive yards allowed for the Colts, defensive struggles. And, even though the offense did well, they weren't able to put it home at the end of the game, which is when it mattered most. And then, Will Lutz, that's just a really frustrating reality that the only time that they needed him to come out and do his one job, which is put the ball through the uprights when they get him in range, he failed to do that. The offense did their job. They scored 4 touchdowns. Will Lutz could have extended that lead at the end, but he didn't. Just a really unfortunate break for the Denver Broncos. So now we're 1-1 on the season. I think this is going to be a season-defining loss for the Broncos just because of how unfortunate it turned out in the end. hopefully Sean Payton has a lot of good things to say in the locker room. Hopefully a lot of practice this week can get them ready. And with a 1-1 record, they can get ready for their first AFC West game of the season against the Chargers next week, and hopefully bounce back and get into the win column once again. Thanks for tuning in to Broncos Digest, everybody. Appreciate each and every single one of y'all supporting. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. Join the Broncos Digest family. But for now, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you soon.